Have you ever wondered if the patterns, behaviors, and results or lack of results you experience in the external world may be stemming from your childhood? In this video, we're going to discuss how your results or your lack of results are not only correlated to your childhood, but also what are the steps you can take today to increase your self-awareness and therefore your emotional resilience, and shift your perception of who you are and what are you capable of. Because when you shift who you are on the inside, what shows up on the outside reflects your self-image. Let's begin with the 5 realms of our total wellness, as I call it. We have, of course, our sense of self, your identity. This is number 1. Then we have our relationship with others. This is circle number 2, your relationships with the external world. Then we have bubble number 3, which is your relationship with money and abundance, which is very important. Then number 4, we have your relationship with your purpose. Do you have a purpose? And if you have discovered your purpose, do you have the courage and confidence to pursue it? And if you haven't discovered your purpose, how could you start discovering it today to create this total fulfillment? And finally, of course, we have number 5, your area of spiritual growth, your connection with a higher intelligence. And regardless of your spiritual beliefs, if you're watching this video, I believe that you know deep inside of you that there is a higher power that governs all those in the universe. And ultimately, this is what I call our inner GPS, our spiritual GPS. When you are following your spiritual GPS, you're always going to find your way home to who you truly are. And if becoming your most authentic self is one of the things you really want, then keep on watching. Okay, so let's start at your relationship with yourself. As I told you in the introduction, if there are any aspects of your identity that are not serving you, chances are you are experiencing self-sabotage, whether this is consciously or subconsciously. The best example I have for you is with your health. If you are overly attached to how you look, if you have any negative self-image experiences, I have had in the past for sure. If you are overly obsessed with your diet, with your lifestyle, with your exercise, and you never attain this unshakable confidence in yourself, and you always strive for a unattainable perfection, then most likely you are dealing with self-criticism or the inner critic, which of course happens in childhood. If we didn't have enough emotional stability from our parents, or especially if we had any sort of verbal or physical abuse, it is very likely for us to develop extreme perfectionism and very harsh self-criticism. So ultimately, when we're talking about health, harsh self-criticism could result, as I said earlier, in you either being overly critical of yourself and your body and your fitness and your age and all of these aspects of our physical manifestation, or you may be overly neglecting yourself. You may be experiencing yo-yo dieting or binge eating or undernourishing yourself or overnourishing yourself. And if this is the case, perhaps this comes from the inner child's wound of neglect. If you have been neglected growing up, you might have missed out on the opportunity to build these healthy habits that we learn from our primary caregivers. As you know, the first things you learn in your domestic household gives you your prism of the world. This is why children who are raised understanding nutrition, having a healthy conversations about their body, their sexuality, and all these things that children and then eventually adults need to learn in order to thrive in today's world. Or if you haven't been taught how to manage your finances, if money was an issue in your household, if sex was an issue in your conversations with your parents, whatever it is, ultimately, if you have ever felt neglected from your parents in the context of learning basic necessities, basic skills that we require in life, you may try to cope with these things that are outside of your awareness through either self-denial or obsession. If you have been raised in dogmatic circumstances when you never felt enough, or you felt that if you are not good enough, you may be punished by God or whatever. When we combine all of these things together, underneath it all, it is a form of self-introspection, what you are invited to do. You are invited to be in this state of self-introspection, to ask yourself, have I been neglected by my parents or primary caregivers in the areas of my health, of my relationships, of my healthy sexual development, of my beliefs about the world, about my philosophy about the world? In other words, were you given enough forum to speak up your mind, or were you scolded for having different opinions? Were you criticized for having divergent opinions? Let's say you were questioning certain things you learned in school. Did this come with a punishment, or did it come with endorsement of you being curious and being engaged and being inquisitive? Because very often when I work with clients, especially at age 50 and beyond, many of them still have fears of being their most authentic selves, because growing up, this meant punishment, it meant bullying, it meant hiding. And if you have any throat chakra blockages, which I often discover with my clients, this again is tied to, were you given that freedom to be yourself growing up? To simplify and to give you action steps. So ultimately, in the context of health, money, and relationships, it is very important for you to recognize if you are dealing with harsh inner critic, or if you are dealing with what we call the invincible inner child wound, or total neglect. On my website, I have so much information about the inner child, including a self-assessment with the 8 most common inner child wounds that I highly recommend you download down below and check it out, because this topic is huge. And I always try to keep it concise and to the point. And in this video, we're only going to talk about the inner critic and the neglect, because if we try to talk about everything, you may get overwhelmed. So let's just stay focused and really help you discern if you are dealing with harsh self-criticism, or if you are dealing with the inner child wound of being neglected. So ultimately, again, to summarize, if you're dealing with harsh inner critic, this shows up in your adult life as extreme perfectionism, never thinking you are good enough, regardless of your accomplishments, regardless of what people tell you, regardless of your looks, regardless of where you live. Nothing is good enough for you. And if that's you, I totally relate. I used to be this person, and even now, every now and again, I hear some residual voices that come from the inner critic. And with practice and with unconditional self-love, you learn how to not only quiet this voice, but to understand psychologically that this voice doesn't belong to you. It's usually the voice of one of our parents. Very often it is the father wound, and it could be the mother wound. If you had a smothering mother, or a mother who never told you she loves you, or if your mother wanted you to be like the other kids, or if your mother wanted you to be a copy of her and her dreams, then you may develop these tendencies of never thinking you are good enough. And ultimately, as this is tied to your relationships, if you are dealing with harsh inner critic, this also shows up in how you perceive feedback. In my course, in my spiritual course, last week we did a module on creating harmonious relationships, and one of the things I was sharing with my students is that when we have harsh inner critic, not only are we very critical of ourselves, but also we are very sensitive to other people's feedback, even if it's constructive. Even if we know that this is good for us, we may take it very harshly, or we may overthink situations or replay conversations in our heads and thinking that if we have said something differently, it might have had a different result, and all of these things. So ultimately, the burden of carrying the weight of this perpetual self-criticism is that it just creates so much pressure, and you feel this pressure on your shoulders. This is why in my work I'm a very somatic practitioner, meaning I always look at the body as a cue of what is happening on the inside. If your posture is slouched, if you are hiding in the back, if your overall body language shows intimidation, this is a sign of you not being comfortable with yourself. And on the other hand, this is another interesting aspect: arrogance. If you are too loud, if you are arrogant, if you are entitled, if you always want to prove yourself and always be right and always be the smartest person and always be the winner at all costs, this is also another form of underlying self-criticism that you're trying to suppress with accomplishments. Enough about the self-criticism, and let's finish this video with the other wound that we are healing today, which is the abandonment wound and the neglect wound. So ultimately, if you were neglected by your parents, or if you were borderline abandoned, whether this was emotionally or physically, what this creates is a very anxious attachment to validation from others, and a very anxious attachment to outcomes. If you have felt neglected by your parents, as I said, if you have ever been abandoned, unfortunately, as you know, we keep attracting the same people and situations until we understand and heal the source of the wound. And when I see people having on and off relationships, or being attracted to avoidant attachment styles, being attracted to people who ghost them or abandon them or disappear out of thin air in romance, this is also tied to you abandoning yourself, actually, because when we abandon ourselves, we abandon our self-worth, and then we start compromising our self-worth. And unfortunately, people don't understand that they are the ones neglecting themselves. They assume that is the other person, they left me, they did that, they said that, and it is this constant external blame or external attachment. Again, unfortunately, very often I see, especially with women, putting a halo around a person and thinking that this person is God, and trying to squish their identity to please this person, when in reality, love is about authenticity. You can't be perfect. You can't be perfect because you're not. Nobody's perfect. And when you show up with authenticity, knowing that the other person is going to be there for you, this creates secure attachments and secure relationships. And as I tell my clients, how you do one thing is how you do everything. From your health, to your body image, to your confidence, to your relationships, to your finances. The biggest breakthrough for my clients when they work with me is when they realize that if they are carrying unhealed abandonment wound, this also shows up in their finances. From a spiritual standpoint, if you have felt neglected by your biological parents or by a romantic partner, you tend to feel neglected by your divine parents. Our divine parents are our divine mother, which is the divine feminine in us, and the divine masculine, which is the divine masculine. These are our spiritual parents. They hold the balance between feminine and masculine energy, which is a different topic for a different video, so make sure to subscribe for more. And to conclude, if you have ever felt abandoned or neglected or not good enough, chances are you are subconsciously assuming that you're not good enough to receive what you want in life, which leads to poverty or scarcity, or even if you are financially stable, you may sabotage yourself and constantly run from feast to famine. If you are holding on the abandonment wound or the neglect wound, you may constantly wait for the other shoe to drop, figuratively speaking, or you always are on your toes. You're always thinking that the other person is going to hurt you or be mean to you, or you put a facade to please this person. And again, in the context of spiritual alignment, if you're constantly doing that, you're not showing up as your most authentic self, which actually repels what you truly want, which is connection, which is meaningful wealth. What is meaningful wealth? Meaningful wealth is when we are wealthy from a place of service, purpose, and fulfillment, and not from a place of grinding and working and compromising our values. I think this is enough for today. This is a long video. So just to sum up, in this video, we discussed how our childhood wounds relate to every aspect of our total wellness. From our relationship to self, this is number one. Relationship with others, your romantic relationships with your children, relationships with co-workers, all relationships. Then we have relationship with money, abundance and prosperity. Then we have your relationship with your purpose, with your fulfillment, with your values, what makes you happy. And then number 5, we have your relationship with your spiritual faith. And not only that, but your relationship with your worthiness of being a master manifester. Because what is manifestation? Manifestation is alignment with the divine power. That this is manifestation. This is manifestation at its finest. Again, remember, if you want to take your knowledge further and integrate, highly recommend to download my free self-assessment. Use the link below. And if you are ready, willing, and eager to fully level up, I highly recommend that you enroll in my 4-week spiritual course, which governs and covers every aspect of inner child work you need to do to become the best version of yourself in every area. This is my best selling course, and I poured all of my love and knowledge into it. Highly recommend that. This course is fundamental for everyone who wants to live their best lives, especially if you are a parent, especially if you want to be a parent, and especially if you want to be in a healthy, secure relationship with yourself and others. This is Anna Maria from Luna Voda Coaching. Remember, you are so unique and special just as you are. You are enough and worthy, and I can't wait to see you again.